Hello and welcome to Upon Further Review, a weekly podcast covering the Summit Athletic Conference here in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Our first episode of the season. What we're going to bring to you tonight is a little bit of recruiting. We're pleased to bring on Alan Trieu from 247 Sports. Then we'll give you a rundown of all the Summit Athletic Conference teams, all 10 of them, give you some insights, give you what to expect from each of these teams leading into the scrimmages on this Friday night. And as the season goes on, we'll give you a recap of our game of the week that is on 1380 The Fan, 100.9 FM, and we'll lead up into our open of the season with the pregame show, also on 1380 The Fan, 100.9 FM. So let's get the tape rolling and hit it.
And good evening, everybody. I'm Eric Dudkevich, better known as Doot, alongside Coach Shannon Griffith. Coach, great to be with you this season. We're going to really go through the SAC, primarily touch on some other conferences and other games as well along the way, but really a cool venture for us too. It's been a crazy summer, and we'll break down all the teams momentarily, but first, I think we got to start off with recruiting. It's been a busy summer for recruiting, and in the Summit Athletic Conference across the city of Fort Wayne, across the state, really. And one of the top people to that really breaks all of this down is, from a recruiting standpoint, is Alan Trieu from 247 Sports, the Midwest recruiting expert. Alan, thanks for joining us on our very first episode, our very first guest here on Upon Further Review.
Yeah, I'm honored. Happy to come on, and thanks for having me.
Sure.
Yeah, it's great
so
for you.
Talk a little bit about, just off the bat, kind of what you do for 247 Sports and really how that fits in with a lot of the talent we see coming through high school sports here in Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Yeah, at 247 Sports we cover recruiting at the major level, Division I, not necessarily just Power 5, but Division I is what we focus on. We write articles on the players, on the prospective recruits. We cover events from 7-on-7s to camps to games. And then, people focus a lot on the player rankings as well. So we do evaluate, rate, and rank the players. We have a whole team that does that. And so I cover the Midwest, and Indiana is obviously part of that, but I have 10 states that I cover. And then we have Steve Wiltfong, who I know a lot of people who follow Indiana high school football know Steve's name. He lives down in Indianapolis. So he and I have kind of tag teamed Indiana for the most part. We used to be separate. I used to be with Scout. He was with 24/7, and we would compete against each other for the news in Indiana. And now we work together. And so it's taken a little bit of heat off the both of us.
Hey, Alan, I think the one thing that we wanted to get out of this segment, and I think because recruiting is such a big component of high school football now, more so than it's ever been. I mean, it's something that is covered, 365 days a year, it seems like. Before we jump into the specifics of the couple kids that are getting recruited pretty heavily here in Fort Wayne, I think it would be good for the audience to understand, what does it mean when a kid gets an offer now versus that final written offer where it all becomes official and binding at that point?
Yeah, there's a couple of ways to look at this. A lot of offers, because kids, you can't get a written offer until September 1st of your senior year. So most of the offers that these kids are getting, including some of the guys we're about to talk about, are verbal. So a large amount of that, it's a verbal promise that you are going to get that offer on September 1st of your senior year. Now, between the time that verbal offer gets extended and that September 1st date, if you don't take care of the things that you're supposed to take care of, and that's everything from your academics to continuing to progress as a football player. If you don't do those things, then that verbal offer can be rescinded, or you just won't receive the written offer. But in the world that I work in and we cover, I like 99% of what we deal with is verbal offers, because that's what kids are getting now. Everything happens so much earlier. Kids are getting verbal offers. They're committing to verbal offers. And all of that is just it's a promise between both sides that is verbal and non-binding. A coach is saying, we will give you this offer to play at our school. And the recruit is saying, I am verbally accepting that offer, but both sides are subject to change. And that's where covering recruiting has become kind of a daily 365-day a year. Like you said, rat race is covering all of the changes and trying to figure out what is committable and what isn't. So within that verbal offer realm of these are all the verbal offers that have been extended, you have different levels of seriousness within that. Some coaches extend a verbal offer, and if that kid wants to commit to that university right there, you can take it. Other times there's verbal offers and it's really sort of a, hey, we want to still evaluate you, or this is a verbal offer, but we still need you to come to camp. And so figuring out exactly what's what is something that's changed in my job over the years, because it used to not be that way.
No question. And I think that's the big thing that I think, because a lot of kids will get a ton of what we call offers, right? They'll have it from school A to Z, and some kids will get 20 some odd offers. Some kids get 4 some odd offers. It varies quite a bit through the spectrum of the recruiting game. And I think it gets a little bit misleading in some respects, because you don't know what the qualifier is behind it, right? You don't know if it's a contingent upon. One of the contingencies you touched on was the fact that you got to meet the NCAA eligibility requirements. So those are the things that are behind the scenes that ultimately qualify those offers. Now, segueing here into the guys that we want to specific talk about is a couple kids here in the greater Fort Wayne area. And both of them are basically top wide receivers. We first got the Tay Johnson kid, who's out of Northside High School. Give us some lowdown on him as you see it from your perspective of watching some of these kids.
Yeah, so first, I think the cool thing is that both the guys we're talking about have top recruits at Northside and then New Haven. Since I've been covering the state of Indiana for now, over 10 years, you've had a couple of recruits come out of those schools, but not necessarily big time top of board guys with these kind of offers. So I think it's great that we're kind of, colleges are coming in and recruiting some different high schools. And Tay is a guy who was really known about starting in his freshman year. He came in, made a quick impact on the varsity that helped get his name out there. And then the thing that we look at 24/7 Sports more than ever now is multi-sport participation. Do you show ability in other areas? A large enough, you look up and down NFL rosters and college rosters, a large number of those players are standouts in other sports. So when you see a guy like Bronte, who has some Division I basketball interest, I think he even has one offer for basketball at the Division I level, right away, that's a sign for us that we need to take a close look at this guy, because if he's athletic enough to be a Division I basketball player, that translates to receiver very well. So you have a guy with height, with length, catch radius. He can use that athleticism to win contested passes. And I think still kind of just scratching the surface of how good he can be. You watch him and we still see some rawness there. And I think that's exciting when you have that level of athleticism and upside and still so much more room to grow.
Plus, he's got a new quarterback coming in, the Bodie Dickerson kid that transferred in from Dwenger now. So now you've got somebody back there that can get the ball and throw it to him, because he's a big kid. He's 6'3", 170. So I think the biggest question that most college coaches are going to wonder is he a basketball player, or is he going to commit to in football? So that'll be the big question mark as we go through the year, and we'll see. And I know, Eric, that you had a couple questions leading into our next young man coming up here from New Haven.
Yeah. Well, yeah. First, the next guy we have is MYLAN Graham from New Haven, and from a perspective of the Fort Wayne area, he tends to be. He's, first of all, you can talk about him a little bit, but also the idea of him being from New Haven. I mean, it's a smaller school compared, outside of the SAC, outside of the main conference, outside of Fort Wayne, how that all plays in the recruiting factor as far as the attention that a lot of these guys get from some of the smaller schools that may be off the beaten path. Just how that kind of all comes about for a kid like MYLAN Graham at New Haven High School, who getting big offers now heading into his this season.
Yeah, so having done this a long time, I've heard a lot of people say, if you're good, they'll find you. And that's not necessarily true. Sometimes you have to be proactive about getting yourself found. And, to use I think a similar example, you look at a guy like Dwayne Eskridge, who obviously had a great college career and made it to the NFL. If he wasn't at Bluffton, would he have ended up somewhere other than Western Michigan? Who knows, right? But you see examples like that all the time, where that's how some of these MAC schools and G5 schools have been able to be as successful as they are. And I think with MYLAN Graham, you have a couple, if there's other guys who are in similar situations, you can take his blueprint in some ways and take a look at some of the things he's done. First of all, training with a guy like Dre Muhammad, who has some connections, has been around for a long time. College coaches have his number in their Rolodex, and they listen to the things he says, because he's had a lot of guys over the years play at the high Division I level. And then some of those offers that you see on that page didn't happen for him until this summer. He started to get some in the spring, but more of those happened in the summer because he went out and earned those offers at camp. And I think if you're from New Haven and some of these schools, if you're Alabama, you may not necessarily have a great perspective on what the high school football is like in New Haven. Who are they playing? Those sorts of things. He goes down there to camp and shows them live that he can play at that level, earns that verbal offer from Alabama. So I think he's taken all of the right steps. Similar to Tay, MYLAN was a early varsity guy, an impact guy, so it doesn't hurt that he has 2 years of varsity tape and a little bit of name behind him to be able to show these schools what he can do. So I do think that schools are willing to offer guys from, high schools that haven't necessarily had tons and tons of top recruits, but you have to put yourself in front of them. And I think MYLAN's done a good job of that.
Sure. And I mean, as far as when the recruiting process starts, I mean, when it kicks into high gear, we talked a little bit about that, but really it's not just your high school football. I mean, 7-on-7 continues to grow. The camp process, I mean, that's all a big part of the recruiting process, as far as just getting your name out there, getting exposure and getting schools to notice you. I mean, the summer scene with 7-on-7 has completely changed, the recruiting aspect. Just why is that? Maybe, talk a little bit about that, Alan, if you could, as far as the significance of the 7-on-7s in the summer.
I think in general, the 7-on-7s and the camps and all of that stuff, it's significant because if you think about the course of a season, you may only have 8, 9, 10, 11 games at most to evaluate a high school player off of. College coaches are busy during that time. They're trying to win their own games, and that's a lot of film to have to watch. And so you supplement that by some of the off-season evaluation that happens. And now we're also talking about 14, 15, 16-year-old young men who can change a lot. Sometimes the kid that you see on that early season film is much different in June and July, physically. Sometimes kids grow 3, 4, 5 inches, add 40, 50 pounds in the course of an off season. So the ability for college coaches to see them in person, I think the May evaluation period, the spring evaluation period, that's why you see a lot of offers going out then, because they can go watch kids work out and even just meet them, see them in the high school, see what they're built like physically. And so I just think that the process has to continue to evolve. And because of that, film is a huge part of it, but it has to be supplemented by some in-person evaluation. And if you take that even up to the highest levels and look at what the NFL does with the NFL Combine, with pro days, with the Senior Bowl, it kind of tracks with that NFL model.
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing that is changed since the days that I was at Ball State recruiting is you're seeing a lot more schools being a year earlier in the recruiting process, that they're coming into the juniors and sophomores now. This is a big year for kids that are in their junior year season wise, because a lot of the decisions will be made off of this tape that they're going to put out. So that's a key component as well. And I tell you, the Fort Wayne area has been very, I guess you call it, fruitful over the last 8 to 10 years. We've had several kids that have moved on to the top Power 5 schools. and we've got several of them in the NFL right now. Jalen Smith, of course, he's battled some injuries, was probably the top name to come out of the Fort Wayne area. But you got Drew Tranquil, who played at Carroll High School, went to Notre Dame. He's with the Chargers. Or a Ben Skronik, who came out of Homestead High School, went on to Northwestern, transferred to Notre Dame, stock went up, and he's out there on the West Coast too. So just to name a few kids that we've had the privilege of watching on Friday night and being able to cover and reaching that high level of competition. So we hope to do this again, Alan. We'd like to get to the point where we cover at least 3 times a season, and we get to, some of these MAC level players that are going to be starting to get those offers now, because, the big boys have kind of decided what they wanted. Now they're going to start with them. But come back again, will you?
Oh, absolutely. High school football is about to start, and that'll be all I do and all I think about for the next few months. So it kind of, there's a reason our company is called 24/7. So I'll be happy to come on anytime.
Alan Trieu from 247 Sports, we thank you for coming on upon further review, and wish you nothing but safe travels this fall season.
Thank you, guys. Good luck with the show. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Well, like we said, that is a big facet of what is on the kids' minds right now, moms and dads too. And I hope that in itself will give everybody a little bit better understanding. And that's what we're going to try to do with a lot of this, is give us a better understanding than we could go in depth on a Friday night during our pregame show on 1380 The Fan 100.9 FM. So we'll have, hopefully, Alan or Steve Wilfong with us, and maybe have them back on in the middle part of the season, have some more maybe breaking news for the recruiting aspect. But really appreciate that. And I hope you guys that are having a chance to watch this first episode or listen to it also enjoyed it. But I think now is the time that we got to preview this SAC race that's coming up, Eric. And I know that I've got last year's season here that I can share on the screen, I believe. And then let's start with our aspect of start breaking these teams down as we go along here.
Sure. Yeah, I think, looking at the SAC from a year ago, 3 teams come out of that as co-champions in Snider, Carroll, and Luers. And it came down to the last game of the regular season. We were there at Luers Field that night when Snider clinched their share, and it was a three-way dance in that regard. And I think, the consistency of this conference in the SAC has been, the idea that, 3-4 teams kind of are that upper echelon. And then from there, everybody else kind of files in behind. And that's kind of the big question going into this year. Again, I would have to think too, is what is that upper echelon going to shape out as? And then also too, looking beyond that, some of those middle of the pack teams that are trying to break into that upper echelon. And then also some of those teams towards the bottom that are just trying to find some consistency. Maybe they're in the second year of a head coach or whatever. So, it's a stacked conference by all accounts again this year, and something that we can look at. And I think it starts, Coach, with the 3 SAC champions, and we'll start with the Snider Panthers. I mean, coming in again, another, team that has got a lot coming back this year, experienced group of seniors, and really always in the hunt year in, year out at Snider.
Well, the first thing I think about when you talk about Snider football is history and tradition. From Russ Isaacs to Mike Hawley, now to Kurt Tippmann in his 14th year there at Snider. A lot of cohesiveness in their staff and what they do. He's 126-34 and came off a little bit, I would call a redemption year, because if you think about 2 years ago, they had a very young defense. Now, early on, they were not very good against the pass, and that's how they were getting victimized pretty well. But as the season went on, those sophomores got a little bit more experience that led into last year, and I think they had a better result. But they had some times where they were battling to stay on the W side of the column. That first week against Northside last year, I think Northside gave them all they could handle and had a late field goal to beat them. But, I think when you look at their team depth wise, number one, I think it starts with Luke Hoppert. I've liked Luke. I've liked his mannerisms, the way he handles himself, and I think he's a good leader. I think that he's one of those guys that will ultimately be their guy that's going to be their coach on the field, so to speak. I really do think that I'm pulling up some video here of Luke, and we'll be able to see some of these highlights of his team last year. And you can see that he's got a chance to be one of those quarterbacks. Now, I'd say one thing on him is, arm strength wise is probably not where it needed to be last year. Sometimes he has to cheat a little bit on the throw, especially the deep ball. But I think he's done a lot this offseason to prepare. I know Coach Tittman is very pleased with his how he handles himself. And I think that's the biggest part. And I think after last year, I think he went into this year, knowing that he had to be the guy that did better. He completed 65% of his passes. That's not bad at all. He had 8 TDs and 5 interceptions. And I think one thing that they do in their spread offense is he can run the football and make plays, as we see here, hitting a wide open guy in the corner of the end zone.
Yeah. And I mean, I think for you talk about the tradition of Snider too. I mean, the aspect for Luke Hoppert coming in is Kurt Tittman said it. Luke Hoppert has started more games than any other incoming senior quarterback in Snider's program history. So he's taken a lot of reps. He's led this team. They won an SAC share a year ago. They get pretty far in that sectional. They lose to Dwenger, so they got that chip on the shoulder. They beat Dwenger in the regular season, lose to Dwenger in the sectionals. But that team got hot too after they took their lumps in the beginning of the year, where they were 1-1, and then they went on a 7-game winning streak. And I think that's the momentum that a lot of teams ride very high and carried Snider. Of course, they lost Tyrese Brown, they lost Dominic Moon, they've lost DJ Moore, but those big senior classes for Snider always kind of refills the cupboard, and some new names tend to come out of that. And I think that's where Snider's tradition and really the ability to coach up kids really plays in their factor and helps out too.
Well, first and foremost, Snider is a team that is going to run the football. They know how to run the football. When they have their power game going, they're very difficult to beat. And I think Langston Lavell's the kid that's going to come back this year and replace Brown. And I think we'll talk a lot about him. And I think one thing about this kid is he's big, he's strong. He's one of those guys that can really explode in the hole, do a lot that way. I mean, here's some clips of him where you get the end zone view where you can really see this kid and his feet. He's got great feet, and he can do a lot of things. I think being 6'3", 215 pounds, he's going to get those tough yards. I mean, he's just a back that's built for this offense. And I really do think that he's going to be a great replacement for Brown. And like you said, there's always someone else out there that's going to be rising up behind him. We'll see who that is. But you got the Juarez kid on the outside that just got an offer from Eastern Michigan. And I think that, they've got a team that I think you're going to see more of the traditional Snider that we're accustomed to.
Certainly. And of course, the 3-man race a year ago, if we kind of if we go down the list here, that another team that just was really good was the Carroll Chargers. A 10-win season for them. They win a share of the SAC title, but also too they go on to win a sectional championship, and then fall at the regional levels. Kind of a wild offseason, obviously for Carroll, with the sudden and sudden passing of Owen Shealy, their quarterback. But this is a team that is seen the highest of highs, experienced the low of lows in the offseason, coming together, rally. I mean, it's really going to see what this team is made of this upcoming season.
Yeah, they're facing adversity, but this time it's off the field, and it's very sad to even have to think about a young man that like Owen Shealy that lost his, life to a dreaded disease. But, I think on top of only that, but they also lost Jeff Becker, who was just a phenomenal quarterback in this league. And then you add to that Coverstone, the wide receiver, who was a very talented kid. But when I saw these kids walk into media day about 2 weeks ago, they are big. I mean, I've never seen Carroll as big as they were when they walked into this room. I mean, the Dylan Bennett kid, the linebacker, who I think is one of the better ones in the Summit Athletic Conference. I mean, he is thick. He can run. He's got all the tools. And then the shocker that we both just got off the wires not more than 10 days ago, Jimmy Sullivan coming over from Homestead now. All of a sudden, does that mean that he's going to be the replacement for Becker from last year? I don't know. Time will tell. But all of a sudden, you look at them and what they've got around them. The Steely kid who's got some MAC offers as well. He's a dynamic player. He took the opening kickoff last year in their new stadium back for a touchdown. I mean, it's unheard of. I mean, this kid can make a lot of plays.
Yeah. And I mean, you talk about that opening night. We were there, a big crowd. They lost that opening game to Luers, which kind of played out in the SAC race for both of those teams. That was the one loss in the conference for Carroll, and kind of kept Luers in control of their own destiny all year. But for Carroll, 10 straight wins after that week 1 loss. So they ran the table after that up until the regionals. And so, they've become a program that, for years they were really struggled, especially in a class 5A at the time when they were in a sectional with Snider and they were in that tough NHC conference with Homestead and some of the other big boys. And now they've kind of, with Doug Dinan over the years, kind of developed their own identity, developed their own program. The fan base really buys in. It's a packed house every Friday night at that brand new stadium. And I think a lot of good things going for that Carroll program. And I think year after year, we're going to start hearing them in the conversation each and every time, like we've talked about for Dwenger for years and Snider for years and Homestead the last several years. So it's a good showing for them last year. And I think that provides a lot of momentum for them this offseason to continue to get better.
No question. And, that next team that's right there that was pretty electric last year is the Bishop Lure Knights, led by Kyle Lindsay in his 10th season there. Going to have 7 returning guys on defense. That's huge for them as well. Little up front, they're going to be young. I mean, I think graduated hurt them a little bit. They stumbled towards the end of the year. It's hard to run the table, and they did it. And unfortunately, they tripped up against Snider. And then, of course, Eastside got them in the playoffs. But I think the biggest question is who's going to replace Carson Clark. Here's a kid that threw for over almost 3,000 yards, 37 touchdowns, and only 8 interceptions. He averaged about 250 a game in the passing game. I don't know if they can replace 41, 42 points a game. Time will tell with that. But they've got a battle right now at quarterback coming in. They got I'm spacing their names right now, Duke. You got to help me out here. Stansky, yes.
Stansky and Colin McKenzie are the two
that
I was hearing about it coming out of media day.
Yeah, and so we got to that point now where now you got to go replace a guy like Carson Clark, and now you got a battle on your hands. So we'll see. Kyle does a great job with the quarterbacks. I think he plays to their strength and play calling. So I think they'll find their guy. Maybe they'll play 2. Who knows?
Yeah, some other big names that are no longer there at Luers. Sir Hale, who rushed for over 1,000 yards as running back. Brody Glenn, the talented wide receiver who caught most of Carson Clark's passes a year ago, another 1,000-yard receiver. So you're looking at a team a year ago that had 1,000, practically a 3,000-yard quarterback, 1,000-yard rusher, and 1,000-yard wide receiver. And so there's a lot of talent that is gone now due to graduation. But, there again, it's just developing players over time in the system that Kyle Lindsay has now put in after 10 years. I think they'll find some people, and that defense, that's really what will stop them to get things over that hump again, because yes, they're probably not going to score 41 points a game, but if their defense can live up big and keep those other teams scoring low, the 21s, the 24s, that kind of scores on the other side for some of those bigger teams, in the conference. I think, Luers will definitely be in the hunt again. And defense wins championships, and they've got an experienced defense coming back. The offensive line is a big question mark
Right.
because it's so young, but and with new players on that, but don't sleep on that Luers defense.
No question. And they, for a small school, a lot of those guys are going both ways. So I think we'll see what happens there and see who they come out with being the quarterback. And but I know Coach Lindsay will pave the way for that. So
Sure.
the other team that is next there, and I think is a team that is looking to redeem themselves a little bit from last year, because the expectations have become a lot higher than a 6-4 season for the Homestead Spartans. So you got Chad Zollman in his 19th season, 152-48. I mean, I have a lot of respect for Chad personally, because my son played under him, and I just like the way he handled himself, way he handled his kids and team. And I know that he will look for a better season than last year for them. I think the biggest thing has been alleviated for them, because it was all talk about who was going to be the quarterback this year. I mean, here's a kid like Peyton Slavin who had a pretty decent year last year as their starting quarterback. And now there's a turmoil on who's going to be that guy, because the Jimmy Sullivan kid was that guy that was going to be the next heir apparent there. Well, he's left. So I like Peyton Slavin. I like the way he plays. I think he's a hard-nosed kid. I don't think, talent wise, is he a Zach Terrell? Probably not. But Coach Skelton does a great job with the quarterbacks there. And I think, from that standpoint, Peyton Slavin, look, he had 1,900 yards last year and 19 TDs, and he can run the ball. So I don't know what else I can say about the kid. I think he's a pretty good quarterback.
Sure. And that offensive line is going to help him. 3 returning starters up front. And now a big target for Homestead too, coming out of the offseason. Grant Leeper, the basketball player, he's going to line up as tight end and a receiver for Homestead, 6'7". So a big target for Peyton Slavin. And with that returning offensive line, a lot of different options. I mean, if you look at this Homestead team, 6-4 a year ago, losses to Luers, to Snider, Carroll twice, and it's the lowest win total they've had since 2013. So, their defense has only 2 returners, so that's going to be an issue for them. Both on the offense or on the defensive line, so they'll have to figure that out. So, it's one of those things where, it's kind of a next man up into some of those bigger men's schools. And, when you have graduation, but it's going to be an interesting Homestead team because, Peyton Slavin's coming back with the big numbers. Grant Leeper enters the fold and, can they continue to light up the scoreboard like they have in years past? And if you get some of these games in a track meet, it's a lot of ways that it can go, and Homestead can be in the mix there with that experience coming back.
Well, and that's the case. I mean, I like I said, I like Peyton. I think he provides the leadership they need. I think the biggest question always with Homestead is defense. Now their defense has improved greatly to the point now where I think they're doing a great job playing aggressive that they do. I mean, they're playing this blitzing style 4-3 where they're turning kids loose and taking advantage of their scheme. So, we'll see where it all leads to. Maybe the controversy will die down now that it's kind of resolved itself, and we move on forward from there.
Sure. Well, another team that, we're getting through as we move through the SAC that says, what about us? The Bishop Dwenger Saints. I mean, a powerhouse in the SAC each and every year. They're a team that, has always got to be looked upon as far as, as an early season favorite. 7-5 a year ago, 5-4 in the SAC. That's not a Dwenger team that we're expected, but they did end the season with a sectional championship. They beat Snider in the postseason. And got to the sectional championship, then lost to regionals. And so for them, a lot of positives coming at the end of the season after a not so positive season top to bottom. But They talk about the unbreakable brotherhood there. That's kind of their motto this year. And now adding CJ Davis in from Northrop, I mean, that makes that team, gives it an extra weapon on Friday nights.
Well, yeah, he was a huge ad. I mean, he's right now he's committed to Marshall. He's already made a decision. He's got some other teams that are looking at him. But Jason Garrett, his 5th season, 42-20. I know there was a lot of controversy or mumbling last year, unhappiness with the Dwenger faithful. That's an every year thing at Dwenger. That's kind of like Notre Dame. They're never satisfied. But I think he does a great job with these kids. I like his demeanor. I think he's got a pretty good offensive mind. I think the transfer of Bo Dickerson is going to hurt them because I don't know if they've got that next guy. And I don't know the reasons behind that transfer. And quite honestly, that's none of our business of the reasons. Bo decided to move to Northside, and that's what he can do. But we'll see where they're at. I mean, that can cause a little bit of adversity to start off, but he'll have a way to round up the guys, round up the troops, and put whoever he feels is the best guy in there. And look, they're going to run the football too. I mean, but you talk about a kid they're going to miss is Tippmann. Now, I've said this before. I said it again. There'll be another Tippmann at Dwenger. I bet on it. I mean, that goes back to the 80s, like I said, when I played. But the KJ was a great player. I really liked him last year. I mean, in some cases, he just put him on his back and said, "Let's go." And I think he added a lot. So there's another kid that's going to be hard to replace this year.
Sure. And, a younger team that took their lumps, so got that experience from a tough season, gives you some adversity, gives you some momentum, and then another year later, I mean, don't you think that Jason Garrett's going to have those guys ready? And so I think Dwenger, a lot to be expected from them again this year. See how it all plays out, but there'll be I'm sure some barn burners of a game in the SAC when the Saints match up with a lot of those teams come this fall. Moving on to another team that is going through a lot of changes, the Northrop Bruins. New coach Quentin Bowen, who comes over. He was a longtime assistant for Snider and played at Snider. So basically has spent the last more than 20 years on the Panthers roster in some capacity. He comes over to Northrop, replaces Jason Dorfler, who went on to Leo for this season. And so, this team, a lot of question marks every year come out for Northrop with a new coach now coming in first season. The loss of CJ Davis. It's probably another question mark here. What about this team, Northrop, for you, Coach? Anything that stands out?
Well, I think Jason got to the point where maybe he felt he did all he could do there, and it was time to seek other options that maybe helps Northrop move forward. I think they've got talent. I think they've done a better job of getting the kids out, and that's going to be Clint's biggest obstacle is getting kids out to play because there's a lot of good athletes walking around the hallways there. They lost some guys, but I think, Hinton, I think he's a talented kid. I think they got some other kids. I think they'll have a quarterback that can throw it around a little bit, but I think consistency with Northrop's the biggest question. I mean, there's one week they could look really good, and then there's the next week that they just don't even look like a team that was, had a chance at all. So if they can get consistency in their play and they can get on the right end of the lucky bounces, so to speak, they've got talent that can carry them. So I don't think it's, a lack of talent in some respects.
Yeah, 3-7 a year ago for the Bruins, beat Concordia and Northside in the regular season. Last winning season for Northrop, 8-3 in 2003 under head coach Matt Stinson. Josh Gaines on that team as well, who later played in the Rose Bowl for Illinois. So don't worry, Northside fans. We haven't forgotten about you. We're kind of going through the list of teams from last year as far as how they settled, and that brings us back to the Northside Legends. Coach, once again, another year with big expectations. Tay Johnson, we talked about him with Alan Trieu from 247 Sports. He's the playmaker, maybe the best football player in the state of Indiana. Now you add new quarterback Bodie Dickerson, and it's a whole new show there for the Northside Legends.
Yeah, I think there's a, an air of they can get it done there. I think, they face a situation like a lot of schools in the SAC do. I mean, their numbers are always questionable, whether they have to play guys on both sides of the ball. But when you got a kid like Tay Johnson and now you've got Bo Dickerson coming in to be your quarterback, I think Ben Johnson Jr. does a phenomenal job with his offense. I think their biggest question has been on defense the last couple of years of keeping the guys out of the end zone. But look, first week of the season last year, they gave Snider all they could handle. And I'm not so sure that game didn't beat them more than once because those kids laid it on the line and came up short. And, I think that did a lot, had a lot of psychological effect to them. So if they can get off on the right foot again this year, with the talent they have, they can beat anybody in the league. I mean, Tay Johnson can take over a game in a heartbeat if he's got a guy to throw to him, and he's got Dickerson to do that. But, they've got some other good playmakers out there. They got the Lambert kid, and I mean, you can just go right down the line of the talent they have, offensive line, defensive line. I don't know where they'll be with that, but again, I think they've got the talent that they can get the job done.
Yeah, and I think for Northside, buy-in has been big for them. They talk, hearing from Coach Ben Johnson Jr. in his second year, they're getting more players. Again, another school that's getting more kids from within the school to come out because there's a little bit of more swag to that Northside team. The emphasis has been in the weight room this summer. I know all 5 of the Fort Wayne community schools have entered in this partnership for strength and conditioning with Parkview Sports Medicine. So they're getting that extra strength and conditioning, and that's big because Northside had to deal a lot with injuries last year as well, and so it was a case for them to be able to get that same group out on the field week in and week out to even have a chance at competing against the Carrolls and the Sniders and the Dwengers of the world. So if these guys can stay healthy and get on the same page, we, the North, may be in the upper north of the SAC standings, if you like what I did there.
a little rhyme and reason there from
There
you,
you
dude.
go. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I agree with you. I agree
Yeah.
with you on that with, everything that they face. But now, we talked about Northside. Let's talk about the Wayne Generals. I heard the other night when they were previewing the Generals that, Coach Haydock said something to the effect that he really feels now that it's his team. He's finally got himself feeling that the guys that are on the field are the guys that he wants, that he's physically recruited to come out. And I think he feels they're getting better. It may not show on the scoreboard or in the record wins and losses wise, but I think he feels they're getting better. What can you say about the Nelson running back? Phenomenal kid, phenomenal rusher. I think he's a guy that we'll talk about as the year goes on Friday nights, and his performance. I like the Neiman Young kid, the D lineman, 6'3", 255 pounds. He is a physical specimen. I mean, that kid is put together, big and strong, and they have 3 offensive linemen returning from last year. And, Coach Haydock, he likes throwing the ball too. He likes throwing that power run game. And I tell you, with a kid like Nelson, he's another one that, is kind of like Langston Lavelle, big, strong kid that can make up for a lot of deficiencies up front.
4-8 a year ago for Wayne. They started 0-4 and then went 4-4 after that. So a little bit of momentum for a team that has struggled in the first couple seasons under Coach Haydock, who will be in his 3rd year, only 6-17 under Coach Haydock. But for Wayne to find that star running back, to have a guy like Lamarion Nelson in the backfield, Sherwood Haydock knows how to coach guys like that. And strong running backs. And I think everything else can fall into place after that with a guy like Lamarion Nelson on your team, the SAC rushing champion, just based off of total yards, 1,600 yards and 13 touchdowns a year ago. Another guy I like to walk out for is Jacob Sharon. He is the 300-meter hurdles champion for the SAC. He's playing in the secondary, 17 tackles and 1 INT a year ago. Likes to fly around the field. He's going to be somebody to watch just because his speed and really kind of the cachet he brings in as an SAC champion. But yes, I think it's only up for Wayne because there's only up to go for them really in a lot of cases. And so see if they can make some hay in the SAC under Haydock. And that brings us to our last team in the SAC, or not the last team, a couple more here. The Concordia Lutheran Cadets, a team that struggled a year ago, got that opening night win against Southside, and then it was a struggle from there. Mike Eschbach only lasted 1 season. Tim Manigal is back, and I think what benefits them is he was only gone for 1 year and really knows the personnel he has out there, and maybe can get Concordia back to some similar winning ways of a couple years ago.
Yeah, Tim comes back, and Tim's a good coach. I think as far as a system, I don't think they'll miss a beat because I think they ran pretty much what they normally ran at Concordia. They got an experienced quarterback, the Eli Mannix kid's back. He had about 1,700 yards a game last year. His problem last year was INTs. I mean, he just one of those guys that had struggled with throwing the ball to the other team. And I think if he can get that corrected, which I'm sure another year under his belt, and his completion percentage up, they got a team that always kind of surprises you a little bit in the Summit Athletic Conference, and they're always a team that does well in their division when they get to the playoffs. That's the big thing there is, they get themselves in a position to go into the playoffs as a hot team. And I think one thing that gets overlooked a little bit from them, they always seem to have a really good defense. I mean, I always felt like they've got a defense that is pretty strong up the middle in the years past. And they're just kind of one of those defenses that, once you get around them and watch them a little bit, you're kind of surprised how decent they are in some respects, and some of the bodies they got, for a small school. So Tim Manigal does a great job. He's another coach that I think in the area does a great job coaching his school, and teaches the kids what he expects from it. And then they go out and do it on Friday nights for him.
Yeah, 2-8 a year ago. Opening night win against Southside, and then didn't win again until the first round of sectionals against Kokomo Northwestern. So an interesting Concordia team with Manigal back and 16 seniors on the roster. I think
right.
We know where the focus has been this year in the off season and all of that. And that brings us to our last team then. For the SAC, and that's the Southside Archers, a team that struggled mightily a year ago, now entering second season under Guy Tiny Lee. 1-8 a year ago, only 14 points on the offensive side of the ball, gave up almost 43 points per game on defense. So there again, a lot of room for improvement for Southside. And I think year 1 to year 2, a lot of times for these types of programs, it's got to be beneficial just to have a full year with Coach Lee.
Well, that helps. You're going to make your biggest strides usually from year 1 to year 2. Let's face facts. He had a lot of adversity last year. I think he lost in one game. He had 10 or 12 kids out because of COVID protocols. Let's hope we're beyond the COVID protocol game. Who knows? But I hope we are, because for a team like Southside, that almost makes them unable to play a game. And that's what ended up happening with a lot of this. But yeah, they've got a room to go. They lose the Lattimore kid, who was a pretty good football player. Quincy English, is another one, but I think he feels like he got a better turnout this summer. More guys in the weight room. They feel like they got more kids out for the team this year, which always helps, because again, Southside's one of those schools that has a lot of talent walking around the hallway. So I think the verdict's out. We'll see what happens as the year goes on. And, the last thing here before we wrap up, this segment with the preview of these teams is, there's going to be a lot of changes next year. And the way the schedule is set up, we're going to basically the 9-game schedule being out of the Summit Athletic Conference and giving the schools each an opportunity to schedule outside competition for the first 2 games of the year next year, and then moving into basically a divisional format for the season with crossover games. But now we're going to see a team like Fishers and Penn and maybe Ben Davis, or, one of the Indianapolis schools. Although I know this is something the coaches wanted, media has been crying for it for the last 5 years. And I think it betters us as a whole in Fort Wayne to have the opportunity to play these games where you get some non-conference competition.
Well, sure. And I mean, I think that, we talked all through these SAC previews of teams getting to regionals and losing, or having a not so good season in the regular season, but, getting hot in the postseason, and then, playing a Zionsville or playing Hamilton Southeastern or a Fishers, and Westfield's another one that really stings a lot of times up this way. And so I think it's one of those things where it gives an opportunity for all the schools to play different competition from across the state. I mean, in a little bit, we'll kind of run through some of the scrimmages that are happening this coming Friday. There are, teams coming from all over
Right.
that are going to play just a scrimmage. Some interesting matchups that you wouldn't see, that kind of opens the door for, a year from now and beyond. So the SAC is going to switch into 2 divisions, with the bigger schools and the smaller schools kind of separated, if you will. By and large, it's the bigger and the smaller schools. So in Division A, you'll have Dwenger, Carroll, Homestead, and Snider. And then in the smaller Division B, it'll be Bishop, Luers, Concordia, Northside, Southside, and Wayne. They'll have 4 divisional games, a rotating cross-divisional game, and 2 conference-wide cross-divisional games during the season. And the out-of-conference games will be week 1 and 2. So, you can see a potential for, week 1 out of the box, a Snider versus a Warren Central, perhaps, or a Dwenger versus, I know Lowell is a team that they used to play in semi-state. Maybe we see that in a week 1 matchup. So lots of great opportunities where we're not seeing so much of the same things and the same scores, frankly, on Friday night that we see year in, year out. And I think it's going to be a good change for the SAC, and it gives an opportunity for other teams to kind of fight amongst themselves in their own division and ultimately crown some SAC champions that way.
Yeah, no question. I think it's a good setup, and time will tell. But we'll, get to that point of seeing some of those teams coming into the city, and that'll be a good measuring stick for a lot of teams. So now let's get ourselves prepared for Friday night and these scrimmages coming up. That most of these teams are coming off a inter squad scrimmage, and I think one thing that people can understand what they're going to see in these scrimmages. Really, the coaches are really trying to get their offenses up to being accustomed to running an 8, 9, 10 play set. So you'll see some open fields stuff. You'll see some goal line, short yardage stuff, and some red zone. So they'll do a lot of what we call scripted scrimmage, where maybe last Friday night they did more of a true game-like setup. So you got Bishop, Dwenger at Carroll. That'll be a good one. Snider always is with Homestead. These are all things that I think benefit these schools. And then you can see, like you said, Doot, some of the like East Noble and Concordia. That's a good matchup for Concordia to get a measuring stick, or Leo at Wayne. Jason Dorfler gets a first chance to see his kids play against another school. So it'll be a good night, even though it's under a controlled environment.
Sure. I mean, look at some of those games. I mean, a Dwenger versus Carroll scrimmage, that's like a preseason barn burner here. But the competition, looking at this group, these games, these scrimmages, I mean, it's pretty even Steven for the most part too. I mean, Huntington North and Northrop, 2 teams that are probably pretty even keel as far as their ability and where they kind of stack up in their respective conferences. Anderson coming into Fort Wayne to play Southside. So, some Central Indiana flavor to the sectional line or the scrimmage lineup this weekend. Snider and Homestead is always fun. Luers at Heritage, I think that's probably called the Kanapke Bowl by now with all those kids that have come through those two schools the last couple of years. And really, so it's a really good opportunity to line up against a different team that isn't your own guys that you haven't been battling all summer, to strap on the helmets and the pads, to line up and hit somebody from a different team. And, obviously you hope, stay away from injuries, get some good reps in from your first team and have a little bit of fun, because the real games come the next Friday night, the 19th, August 19th, and those count for real.
No question. And I think that's the other thing too, is we don't know what position battles there are out there. These games go a long way to determine who starts next week from this Friday. You may have some positions that are not set in stone quite yet, and these scrimmages become big evaluation tools for coaches to see how kids handle themselves. It's a whole different ball game when coaches can't get on the field and cross those white lines. We just get the best seat in the house and let the kids play. So you get that, and I think we're on top of a good Friday night kickoff to get us to next week, and I'm really looking forward to this. Our stuff that we're doing here upon further review, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I could ask the people in the audience, do two things for us: like us on YouTube and Facebook, and subscribe, because we're going to be bringing these things to you in a live format each and every week throughout the season, right up through the end into the sectionals and stuff. But each and every week will be a little bit different. We'll try to preview not only the other games of the week, but leading into the Friday night game of the week on 1380 The Fan, 100.9 FM. Doot and I doing the pregame with Jim Shevlin. And then I joined the voice of Fort Wayne high school sports, Brett Rump, up in the booth to call these games on Friday night. So we hope that you will enjoy all the things that we're doing as we do, and come and listen to us. You can find us on all the podcast platforms throughout the internet, I would say. But dude, I look forward to it. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a great season. And this is kind of, we talked about this as we were kind of figuring out the concept for it all. Just kind of an extension of what we do. We kind of do the Friday night pregame show on the Parkview Sports Medicine High School football tailgate pregame show. You do the 1380 game of the week with Brett Rump. And then this kind of serves as a kind of way to recap, upon further review, the week that was, the Friday that was, and then move the chains, if you will, to get us to the next week. And we're excited for it. We already know, by the way, Coach, where we're heading for week one when it counts for real. And I'll go ahead and show you that now. We're heading to Homestead. So week one, game one, Northrop at Homestead, 1380 The Fan game of the week. Pre-game starts at 6:00 from Walters Stadium. It'll be the coach, Jim Shevlin, and myself leading you up to a kickoff. And then, of course, the big game leading off the season from the booth, the 1380 The Fan game of the week between Northrop and Homestead. And then, of course, we'll have the post-game coverage, post-game show at the Coventry Pizza Hut. So you can find it on 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM. Also online stream if you're tuning in from anywhere in the world, or just ask your speakers the 1380 The Fan skill. So, Coach, it's going to be an exciting season. This is cool to kind of get this started, to introduce, and we're going to do this all season long, previewing the games, looking back, introducing you to some cool people, cool interviews with players and coaches, and just another way to take high school football in the Fort Wayne area to that next level.
Yep, we're going to have a good time doing it. We'll try to get as many coaches on as humanly possible as we break down some of these games a little bit more in detail, including some of the kids. Hopefully we'll get some of the players to come on and join us and talk to them about, what they think of their team this year and this season coming up. But again, please like and subscribe on YouTube and Facebook. We'll be here each week on Wednesday night at 7 p.m. for Upon Further Review. For Doot, I'm the coach, Coach Griffith. We thank you for being here. God bless and good night.
Good night.